Hi, and welcome to Comics from the Arc for the week of January 29th, 2025. Devin and Jeff. Here to discuss all the comics world to us this week. Um,
I
you
think you
didn't read
just
anything.
glitched.
What?
I think you just glitched.
I
You
um
look like Penelope. Is that your special power?
yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Anyway, Devin didn't read this week due to the fact that he had a different topic that he wanted to discuss, but
Actually, I've been busy because of my other topic.
that said, last week when we were talking about Diamond, I didn't get to talk about this comic, and I wanted to take a moment out to point out that the Doctor Doom Rocket Raccoon comic that came out was amazing. I loved it. J. Michael Straczynski is doing a series of one shots that take Marvel characters that you would never put together and putting them together and see the interaction. And I have to say that as a fan of group dynamics, I love the concept behind it, but the pairings that they have, like Nick Fury and Fing Fang Foom, or Captain America and Volstagg from the Warriors 3.
They're kind of
Those, I mean,
they're going way out there in that
they are
one.
going way out there. So I'm
Oh,
not sure if I'm gonna buy into those, but Doctor Doom is one of my favorite villains, and I have a good appreciation for Rocket. So I bought the first one. My fear was that it was going to be a one shot that tied into
like Doom Academy or something.
right where it was more of, well, once you get done reading this, then it's gonna kind of lead to this next event.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and to qualify what I said there, Doom Academy is the upcoming series that's going to replace Strange Academy since, lo and behold, guess who Sorcerer Supreme is?
right.
So, anyway, go ahead.
But anyway, this was truly a done in one, and it had some solid humor in it. Not like slapsticky pie in the face, but they actually almost did a version of Who's on First.
Yeah.
And oh my god, I was laughing so hard. My wife was just occasionally, if she was listening to an audiobook, she would just look up at me, and I'm just like, and then occasionally I would just have to show her something because it was just so funny, and
Nice.
the reactions to things. Um, Basically, it actually references a Guardians of the Galaxy story from 2021 where Doom and Rocket actually switched bodies for a moment
Okay.
and then switched back. And in that time, Doom could appreciate Rocket's acumen
Yeah.
when it came to tactics and machinery and so forth. So Doom had an issue that he needed someone that he could run ideas by. And Rocket's like, well, don't you have any friends? And Doom's like, I don't have, because if you have an ally, they're for
Yeah.
a purpose, and then when that purpose is done, they become an enemy. And then he was talking about, and I wouldn't go to my enemy because of this. He's like, you're out in space, you have nothing to do with me. I could trust you with whatever it is that I'm working on because you're not going to see this as a threat, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And so then they start talking and they have a meal together, and there are time elapses where Doom is trying to explain something or Rocket's questioning, and
Mm-hmm.
it'll say like, 1 hour, 7 minutes later, and it's just going back and forth. And watching them work together, it's like, I could see how that group dynamic would work out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the 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 smallest quibble, the only thing that I could point at and say that this is the one thing I didn't like about the book
Yeah.
is so trivial, but they gave Rocket rounded ears. He looked more like a little bear than a raccoon. Like if they gave him a triangle shaped ear, it would have
Mm.
looked better. And that's literally the only thing that I could point at and say
Or
this
like a
is
cat that got too near the fan in the
something
50s.
right, or like or if it was a Maine Coon.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, this book was hilarious and deep. There was a part where they were talking about time travel before the Big Bang, and they said, well, the Big Bang is what started space and time as we know it. So if you're traveling back before the Big Bang, before you had time, then how can you time travel? Because there's no
Mm-hmm.
coordinates that you can put in there, and so anything that you're trying to get from before that point in time, how do you navigate? And so that really blew my mind. I'm like, holy cow, and so
Well, they addressed that a little bit with the whole Galactus issue as well.
right. Well, and honestly, I thought that's where they were going with it, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was actually a really profound story. It made me kind of ask a couple of really deep questions, and but then there were so many laughable moments just watching these two interact because we know that Doom is full of himself and has the superiority complex, and to a degree, so does Rocket, and he's not going to take shit from anyone, let alone Doom. And so they kind of had some
Yeah.
back and forth where you're like, oh god, I'd like to see this one go down.
Yeah.
It was a fun read. It was self-contained. It was a $4.99 book, which anymore that's
Normal.
normal.
It really is.
So I really enjoyed it. Um, and I'm encouraging anyone who's listening to this to give it a go because this one was just so entertaining. And honestly, anything that you need to know about these characters is either common knowledge within the comic community,
Mm-hmm.
or you can pick up from like a movie.
Yeah.
Um, they even had the editors. There was an editor note,
Mm-hmm.
and then the assistant editor had a note,
Yeah.
and then you see a back and forth between the editor and the assistant editor in the notes.
Mm.
And so like we really don't need to cover this
Kind
right
of like a
now.
Monty Python thing.
Kind of,
Yeah.
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 There was
Those that were responsible for the sacking have been sacked.
and so there were different forms of humor throughout this, and I really did appreciate that because it tickled different funny bones.
Yeah.
So and when it was all said and done, I felt like I got my money's worth. I loved the art. I loved the story, the humor. It made me actually question a couple of things. I would really love to see another one of these with these characters later on. I have to say that the other pairings, I really am just having a hard time finding motivation,
Yeah.
especially the Nick Fury versus Fing Fang Foom book that will be coming out. That's going to be a hard sell for me. But if it was as entertaining as this, it might be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead, there's also a Spider-Man versus the Marvel Universe. I'm totally in on that. So, if nothing else, pick up this one book. It is so very much worth it.
Well, very cool.
All right.
All right. So, like you said, I didn't read much. Well, I did read one book, and it was because it was a back issue that had come through. It was, and I'll bring it up next week and show it off. It's called Slow Death, and it's a late 70s underground book that it felt like I when you look at the timing that it came out, it absolutely did fit the time. But I mean, it fits today just as good as it did then. So we'll talk about that one a bit more. But the real thing for me this week is still dealing with the fallout from Diamond at this point, and you know, even the little things at this point. Trying to come up with how we're going to handle something as small as bags for the store. Once I run out of those free comic book day bags, if Diamond doesn't come out of this and reorganize and come back to business as normal, you know, when I'm out, I'm out, and I'm going to have to start taking that into consideration. What's it mean for Free Comics Book Day this year? You know, they're saying that, you know, they're going to make it, but at the same time, when you look at when they're viable till until versus when Free Comic Book Day is, it's a pretty tight.
Window.
Yeah,
Well, and
extremely so. And then how much extra liability does that add for them to get those sent out?
well, and you know, as just a couple of pieces of background information, again, they said that they were able to fund everything up until April 1.
Yeah,
And at that point in time, if there isn't a buyer, that they're going to have to shutter. That
Liquidate.
said, Free Comic Book Day, first Saturday of May, make
5 weeks later.
5 weeks later, and then it's one of those things where
How does the timing work? But and the thing is, even beyond that, so now we've looked at like even some of the small stuff, and then you start looking at these small publishers. Vault's done move to be able to take care of themselves. Boom is moving over with Dark Horse and IDW and such. You know, and so you're starting to see some movement, but the ones you're not seeing are the ones like we were saying, okay, Antarctic Press, you know, stuff like that.
Black Mask.
Yeah, Black Mask, absolutely Mad Cave Studios, but some of these do appear over on Lunar. Okay. So hopefully they will remain there, and they've worked something out. And I'm hoping that there's a company somewhere that can pick up a lot of these smaller companies, because for them to get into previews, they had to basically pre-sell X number of dollars for it to be even showing in the previews. I mean, it wasn't like ground shattering or you know or earth shattering or anything like that. It was like $2,500. You know, where and when you're looking at a worldwide distribution, you know that's not unheard of.
Outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, especially considering, you know, heck, even out of my little store, you know, some of the smallest of small books, you know, I always have like one person pick up at least most of them. So,
but then again, you know, when we don't have that avenue for them,
yeah, it's going to cause some more issue. The other thing that I'm starting to look at is with the shipping splitting to so many different places, what's that going to do to our shipping? I mean, granted, right now we're riding high with a couple of nice situations from some of them, but it's as they have to move to different avenues, you know, is that going to maintain, especially with shipping costs being what they are at this point? I mean, heck, just to send a basic 8 ounce package through the mail anymore costs $4 and some change. So, but I guess the point is on all of it is at the beginning of this, you know, I actually felt better at the beginning of this than I do at this point. Right now, the further along we get, the scarier it's kind of becoming, the less sure the footing is. And I'm very concerned for the smaller shops that have to depend on the shop to maintain their, you know, day to day lives. You know, just to put a roof over their head, food on their table.
Right.
Because now that you're going to split out all those places, incur extra shipping, plus they're going to have to find other places to get their pop culture stuff, Funko Pops, action figures, all that. There's no one stop shopping anymore.
You're going to have to farm it out to several different places, and that's going to be added stress and added time.
Yeah, and most of the time when you go to the other places, with Diamond, you're able to buy like one Funko Pop at a time. Most places else, you have to buy and buy a case of 6. So you end up with 6 of everything.
And unfortunately, this is one of those fields where, you know, you're not going to have, you know, 5 or 6 stores in a close enough area where you're going to communicate, say, hey, listen, how about we all buy in on this, and you know,
well, even if you were, it wouldn't even be worth it, because then you're dealing with, okay, who's gonna get the box that's slightly better than the other box, and it turns into a nightmare no matter how you look at it. And the biggest problem is especially with your real small stores, is they could afford, the sub $10, after shipping and everything on this Funko, and to put it up and make a few bucks, but what they can't afford is to drop $40 on six of them that they're going to sell one of,
Right.
or maybe two of, and a lot of them are going to sit for quite a
Well,
while.
and then the shipping for having to ship 6 versus 1.
Yeah. Well, that actually, weirdly enough, doesn't get too much different. Because when you get down to the weight and your overall cube, the difference between one Funko and six Funkos is negligible. So the problem is the initiation of any shipment, and the level it starts at anymore. I mean, you look at, heck, just a first class package, your low end's like $1.
Well, and then you also pointed out that by being outside of the major metro areas, your shipping is going to be at a different.
Yeah, you end up, the further away you get from the distribution center in the metro areas, your shipping does go up from certain distributors, and it is noticeable. So,
And
but it's, like I said, it's where I'm hoping going forward that, you know they do find a buyer, or at least find somebody that buys up the liquidation and reopens under completely new management type situation, because if they don't want to maintain the stigma of Diamond or anything, they just want to start fresh. But um I'm hoping something comes about on that. It maybe, you know like I said, maybe Lunar steps up and wants a East Coast property, but I think we need something to consolidate the remainder of the comics and the pop culture in. I mean, it's fine and dandy, and I really love the open competition of the multiple distribution, and not for one title, but that you have Penguin dealing with certain stuff, Lunar with some, Diamond with others. But I'm hoping we have that one place, one stop shopping still somehow for all the little stuff.
that would definitely help. And I would think that if they were able to consolidate and then, let's say, okay, we're breaking up the 6 pack of Funkos and we're going to get some profit because, you're not wanting to buy 6, you just want 1.
Yeah.
And if I'm absorbing some of this, then you're going to pay me a little more so that you don't have to pay a lot more over here. And
Yeah. Well, and weirdly enough, what I was paying on the per Funko from Diamond versus where I had to buy 6 at a time was, I mean, it was like maybe 6 or 7 cents. It was minor. It was, and so
but when you look at
over
volume,
volume, number one, and number two, the fact that they can guarantee they're going to sell those 6 because they have 6 stores that need it or whatever.
right?
So
When you cast the net
yeah.
wide, you're going to be able to get more.
Yeah, I think the problem was they just got a little over their heads on some stuff. Maybe overbought a few things, and I think the closure during COVID was really one of the. It hurt them a lot, because that's what cost them DC going to Lunar, and it cost them a lot of other problems going forward.
Well, if you think about it like building, if you build something, like if you have lay down sand where the sand can kind of fill in cracks and kind of stabilize and give you a. Well, if you think about all the little businesses being a grain of sand, when you spread it out to kind of level the field, and then you can build up your Marvel and your DC and the bigger projects. That's all supported on the smaller businesses.
Yeah.
Whether it's, feeding into the up and coming artists or the small time publishers or the small mom and pop stores, it's all feeding into
Yeah.
this greater machine.
Well, and a lot of it might just come down to, as comic shop owners, we're going to have to expend more energy to hunt down what's coming out and then hope that we get contacted when something's happening. Because let's face it, another thing that's owned by Diamond is the comic shop locator. And I think we've talked about that before too, because that's another thing that what happens to that. So yeah, it gets it's pretty far reaching when you start thinking about it, because they've had their claws in this for
40 years.
Yep, 40 years.
They came about in 1983, and over the next decade, they were slowly kind of amassing to the point where by the 90s they were really firing on all cylinders, and even to the point where they were being investigated as being monopoly.
Well, I remember even in the 80s doing my early order forms at my comic shop for Diamond, in like the mid to late 80s. Because you didn't have the big, it wasn't the big preview book, but I still had to basically sit down, across the counter from my person. They'd kind of go through with me what was going to come up, and
it was almost like voting. Like, okay, just
yeah,
you got your ballot. What do you want?
Oh yeah, well, and then when they started running the not just the previews, but in general, a lot more literature on the different things they were offering. I mean, that's where you saw a lot of these small independent companies come out of nowhere. I mean, Dark Horse first, Eclipse, they just came out of the woodwork. Comico, yeah, that's an '80s one as well. So I mean, it gave possibility for them to
right, and by giving them an outlet and exposure, then getting your foot in the door, all of a sudden that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Well, and then all of a sudden you're an independent comic book versus an underground comic book. I mean, really, if you think about it,
it gives you legitimacy.
Yeah, it does. So, but anyway, that's about all I have. Is at this point we don't know what the hell's going on, and we're every day we're finding out what new distributor to go to for the titles, and as of right now, it doesn't look like anything is really slipping through the cracks, but it's going to.
Well, and the way this has been moving, it's been, a couple of days, no real change, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom,
and the boom, boom, boom is a lot of bad news every time.
Right. And so I know that they've already released what they're doing for Free Comic Book Day, and they had done the ordering for it, but when it comes time to ship it, will they have the money to ship?
Well, not even the shipping. Will the companies even provide them? For example, Image Comics. Are they going to even? They're not going to bother with Diamond because Image goes through Lunar now.
Well, and but so DC had Free Comic Book Day stuff, even though they weren't going through Diamond.
Well, and on even a bigger note than this one is, for example, right now they owe Hasbro like $900,000. They owe Wizards of the Coast like $1.1 million. They owe like $700,000 plus to like 4 or 5 different comic book companies. I mean, you have all these big dollar amounts owed. And then you're going to go out and say, hey, I need you to put together, 100,000 of these bags for these orders that we have. Dude, you've got so many creditors beating down your door. How much is the printer going to want to do that?
Right.
So I think they're going to run into all kinds of issues on this one.
So as we get information, obviously, we'll be back to discuss it.
Yep.
Keep you informed. But in the meantime, if you ever have any questions, we're active on Messenger, or you could call the store, or better yet, stop in.
Yep.
And we will be more than happy to help you.
Yep.
And on that note, we'll talk to you next week, if not sooner. Have a good night.